All right. All right. We have now done a new model, non-local realism. We are now on programs. This one's going to be very fascinating and relatable. All right. So we need to start with a well, okay, I'll write it here and then I'll draw it below. But so essentially we're looking at this whole thing's going to be consciousness, programs, reality. So those are your three story beats of how it works. Consciousness, programs, reality. So coming back to our handy dandy tree visual and the cycles of information. Consciousness, programs, and reality. So I do really love how the acronym CPR, like you get CPR. So good. Okay. So another really good word for programs is ideology. So let me make this a little relatable in a way. So let's say something like that. I don't know. Good enough. Stretch that side down. There you go. All right. So here's our classic picture of Earth or the world or whatever, right? And what I would like for you to try to see, if you want, and this is going to require a little bit of getting used to seeing in this way, is through this word connectome. I think is a really good way of putting it. So this, what I'm going to draw over here, is actually directly overlapped on top of this. It's the same thing, but I want to keep it separate for you to be able to see it more clearly. So, right? So we're going to use this word connectome, which, essentially it's a wiring diagram. Or another way of saying it is cognitive cognitive clusters, and then they're relating. Okay? So, so now you can imagine, you got someone here, another one here, another one here. This is really, again, you got your, here you got your tree, and, again, look at how clearly you have your circle. You got your circle here, right? Here's another one. These are all, perspectives. These are all perspectives. And all these perspectives they're all wired together, and they're talking to each other, right? So you have all these little codes, right? So this one is running, whatever perspective. It's hard to see that, but that's like DNA over there and DNA over here, and each one of them is running their own codes, right? So you got your circle and you got your codes, right? The circle, is really your observer, right? Your observer consciousness, and the codes are the programs that it's running. So all of these they're talking, right? This is all like talking or connecting, right? So you got your, you're talking, you're connecting, you're relating, right? This is the internet, right? The wiring diagram, it's really the internet. And now here comes the fun part about about the programs that are running, right? So very classically, right before I get there, let me just say, whatever programs consciousness is running are what reality experience whatever programs consciousness is running is whatever reality experience it's generating, which is then interfacing with other programs and other reality experiences in this connectome, in this internet-like wiring diagram. Okay? So based on the program that you're running, you're gonna fit into cognitive clusters, right? So hence, now we'll talk about one of the most common cognitive clusters is political divides, right? So one of the core aspects of the drama that consciousness loves to have with itself is duopoly in politics. So you have this, like, just as an example, let's take the United States. There are many other duopoly political tensions happening in other nations across the world, but we'll take the United States as an example. So you have your classic Republicans, your classic Democrats, and you see that, they're running a program, right? It's just consciousness running the program of, I identify as Republican, I identify as a Democrat. And then what happens is they cognitively cluster together as a shared identity, and the other side cognitively clusters together as a shared identity. And then they interface and relate from the programming that they're running, right? So they're not really interfacing from a shared or unified consciousness. I mean, ultimately, everyone is. But if you're so caught up in your role, in your dramatic role on the stage, then you will believe that you are, in fact, your program, right? You are consciousness. You are not the program that you're acting on the global stage. You're not you're not the program that you're acting out on social media. You're not that. Ultimately you are, because it's a fully integrated unity. But if you're so caught up and lost in it, you will be willing to kill someone else that doesn't share your program. And that's where you get war. That's where you get violence. So if I'm running a program, right, and this is really like your God. You see? Your program is like your God. It's like your orientation. It's your fundamental metaphysic, right? It's the way that you're orienting yourself. So if you're orienting yourself from pure consciousness as a unified singularity, the intention of I'm going to kill you, it just doesn't arise, right? But if you're interfacing from your program, which is, I believe that I am X or Y attribute, like I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat, or I believe in this ideology and you believe in that ideology, but you're inferior, mine is superior, so I am in the right to kill you or to suppress you or whatever. That's where you get all of the tension and the drama and the war and the militaries and the political agendas fighting. So this is so fascinating. This is probably, programs, there's a reason why programs are the bridge between consciousness and reality. That's a very, very, very important, sentence. Right? So programs are the bridge between consciousness and reality. That's why this is so fascinating. It's so fascinating because another way of seeing this is that this is basically this is like a biological, it's like a biological culture of information. right? This whole thing is like a biological culture of information talking to itself. And that's so fascinating. So, another aspect to the wiring diagram that's really important is combinatorics. So that's like let's say that these two come together and two programs make a new program, right? And I can also write, combination to make it's simple, but it's really, combinatorics, which is basically combination, recombination. So you have this combinatorial nature of the programs. So for example, oh boy, there's so many of these. All right. So okay, let's just take the most, besides the Republican and Democrat one, which is a very common one that's easy to understand, right? Let's also, let's take that and kind of merge it a little bit with the sports one. The sports one's also very like simple and easy to understand, right? So basically, if you have like I'm from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, so there's a lot of Minnesota Vikings fans here. There's also a lot of football, NFL. There's also a lot of, Green Bay Packers fans. And so there's a lot of, tension, between those two teams in the area. And if you can imagine, one is a Minnesota Vikings running the program of Minnesota Vikings, and the other one is running the program of Green Bay Packers. They share a division, right? So, so what happens is, if you then combine that with like Republican or Democrat, now you have like somebody that is like a family, let's say, like within a family, right? The family itself is both or are both or three family members or four, like mom, dad, and two kids or whatever the combination is. But where the whole family is, let's say, a Minnesota Vikings fan base, right? They all, yeah, we love that. We run that program, right? But then, half of the family's a Republican and half of the family's a Democrat, right? So now you have this fascinating thing that happens in the culture, right? In the way that these programs interface, consciousness and its programs interface, because you have they're both they're all, so the family, let me bring that one here. So you have how, like within a family, you have you have your family, and you have your, like your mom and dad, and let's say you have your two kids or whatever, right? Or whatever the family structure is. And then you have like maybe the son and the father or something like that, or the daughter and the father, daughter and mom. I don't know what the combination. Maybe the parents are conservative or the children are liberal, whatever. But the point is that two of them, let's say, the whole family shares the cluster, right? So here's one cluster that they share called the Vikings cluster, right? Vikings. So they share that, right? But then what's fascinating is that then the other program that they don't share is that some of them are Democrat and the other ones are like Republican. And you can replace this with any program, with any sports or with any politics or any position on a political issue or positions in any opinion or any ideology. You can put into this combinatorial interrelating system, right? And so now what happens within this family is that the family has it has the opportunity to either learn how to you either learn how to coexist or you have this intolerance. The thing about learning how to coexist is it really requires consciousness. It requires you to see that you are in your own dojo. You're in your own dream. You're in your own reality simulator. And if you really feel that clearly, you'll feel the desire for contrast. So meaning when your children have a different ideology than you do, or when your parents have a different ideology than you do, you actually want that contrast. Because being the same ideology is boring. So this is a pretty high level metaphysical notion of how consciousness plays this game with itself. And it's actually, quite frankly, it's the lowest notion in a way. It's like at the root of the well is consciousness desiring contrast to entertain itself, right? To have drama and experience and interrelating and scenes with itself, stories with itself, but from differing viewpoints, from differing ideologies. So you want your family members to think differently than you do. But now the crux is, can you love and accept your family members as they are? Or are you constantly going to be in tension and at war with them and kicking them out and not talking to them and all kinds of stuff? So that's a really good question. Where do you land there? Have you done some of that inner work to then heal and be able to love your mom or dad or son or daughter or whatever, even though they may have a different perspective than you do. Have you done that work? Because if you do that work, reality does get pretty interesting. Like a certain dimension or flavor or taste of reality is missing when you are just at odds with each other, right? But if you learn how to integrate and hold them as they are with love, and they learn how to do that to you, you get to connect at a deep, deep level, and then you can even talk about at a level that you may not have had access to, and then you get to talk about how cool it is that, in fact, we don't share the same perspective on some things, but that's good, and we can calmly talk about that and figure out how we want to live those aspects of our lives. So, this subject is fascinating, the connectome and the combinatorics, because new things are always birthed. Like one that I really liked recently, like as a good example of a combinatoric. Okay, yeah, let's take that one. I can get a little bit more polarizing, which is probably good because it helps you understand it better. But let me just get a little more polarizing to help you understand it. Just keep in mind that this is just a way of understanding how consciousness is running programs, generating its reality, and relating. And it's not an endorsement for any specific view whatsoever. Okay? Okay, cool. So let's just take a, like a combinatorics example. Let's I'll even So one good combinatorics example is all of a sudden you have these things like Latinos for Trump, just as an example, right? So you have one cognitive cluster called Latinos, and you have another cognitive cluster called for Trump or pro Trump, and you can replace Trump with Kamala Harris or whatever, right? And you have or blacks or Armenians, right? Or Chinese or whatever. It doesn't matter which like ethnicities you put into this blank and which political candidate you put into this blank. This is what I mean by you get these new combinatorics, right? Of perspectives or positions that are then interrelating with each other, right, on the stage. The biological culture is really the stage. It's the stage for the drama. Right? This is your stage drama. So, what's another polarizing example? I kept it pretty mellow down here. Let's see if I can get another polarizing one. Okay, yeah, let's do that one. Okay. Right, so there's a whole cognitive cluster of Christians and there's a whole cognitive cluster of feminists, and somehow now there's Christian feminists, right? So you've taken two programs, right? Fundamentally, your consciousness. You're not a Christian feminist, you're consciousness, right? But then consciousness is running the program called Christian, and then it's running the program called feminist. Those two programs are merging together like a DNA strand and recombinating into a new perspective out of infinite potential. And then it's meeting on this stage drama and then clustering cognitively with those that have a similar perspective, right? You get where this is going, and then those perspectives are like, we're pro-Christian. Oh, okay, well, we're pro this other religion, and then it's like, oh, well, do you know how to reconcile that? Or are you ready to hurt somebody because they don't subscribe to the same program that you do, right? Or, feminists and masculists or whatever, So you have the same the same core essence, which is that you're just fabricating programs out of nothing, out of potential, out of consciousness, which is all the same thing. Nothing, consciousness, potential, the bootloader. It's all the same thing, infinity. And then you're running those programs in this weird combinatorial way from this oceanic library of possibility. And then those are meeting on this stage drama, right, called the world or reality, and then you're cognitively clustering with who believes in the same thing that I do. Oh, you do? Great, you're on my team. Cha-ching, awesome. Who doesn't believe what I do? You don't believe what I do? Okay, well then I can poof, 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 and and so that's the essence of how these programs relate with each other. And if you have consciousness, if you have a deep well of consciousness within you, you can see how you give rise to all programs and how all programs interrelate. Also, another thing I want to mention before wrapping that up is before wrapping the whole session up, really, we're getting there. Supermodels, right? Not in your conventional sense of like beautiful men or women, but beautiful programs that are very large cognitive clusters, right? So, meaning a supermodel is one that that a lot of consciousness is running, right? So you have these huge supermodels. Where do I want to do that? Let's do here. So you have this huge supermodel, right? And then it perfectly encapsulates this one, because let's call this, this supermodel is like male, right? Or man, right? It's like an identity, right? And then you have another huge one called female, right? So you have this other one over here, and it's like, female or woman, and these are like, 4 billion people identify, or something, whatever, as one of those two. So it's a huge model, right? It's a huge program that is being run, right? So just needed to adjust some of my lighting. So these are what you would call supermodels. Right? And you could even say that slightly smaller supermodels are things like a Christian, right? A Christian is a large cluster like 1.5 billion or whatever, right? Right. Yeah, that's the right color. Like another huge cluster, right? 4 billion, 1.5 billion, whatever. And then there's everything that doesn't identify as a Christian, or doesn't identify as a gender, or that doesn't identify as a political position or a nationality or a way of seeing or a way of thinking or a way of being. You know, so when you're having a conversation, someone's really trying to pin you down and be like, well, do you believe in X or do you believe in Y? And it's like, bruh, I don't care. It's like, I'm too free to put myself in a position like believing in X or Y thing that then creates the whole combat thing, right? The reason why you want to put an X or a Y position or an attribute to an observer or to consciousness is because then you know how to position yourself in combat, basically, right? So if you don't do that, then you're like, you can believe what you want and we can coexist together. It's like, it's so much simpler than that, like more like fierce and combative style of of being. Okay. Man, there's so much on this one subject. Jeez, it's such a big one. What else is absolutely critical here? I think that's pretty good. There's something else about programs and that I wanted to mention. But it's not there now. So that's pretty damn good. Pretty damn content. This is such a big subject. I mean, this subject alone is like so fascinating to keep unpacking. I have a dozen at least more profound examples of what happens in the connectome of interrelating when consciousness is running different programs, and how those are supermodels and how they're recombining and how they're interacting, and if you know how to heal or if you can't, and then you have tensions and relationships snap and all kinds of fascinating things along that line of thought. So we'll probably end up focusing on this more too, because it's such a fascinating subject. But that's pretty good. This one got to 40-minute sesh. All right. So that will wrap up programs now. That session. That was a fun one. Thanks for tuning in. And chit chat in the comments below if you'd like. And we will see you for the next session on simulating stories, scenes, choice, recursion. There's a lot of good stuff in there. So, all right. Much love. Thanks for tuning in.